So today I thought I'm going to mix a little bit of a word with some of the stuff that we've seen people experiencing during this time of lockdown, and try and bring to you something that I hope will be helpful, practical, and also just really increase your faith in God during this time. So there will be a little handout. I've just done a PDF of some of the basic points so that you don't need to be typing away and trying to capture them. But what I wanted to do was to take 6 basic things that everyone has lost during this particular time of the pandemic, which of course no one could have possibly dreamed of or prepared for. We don't want to focus on the negative and look at all of the losses, but what we do want to do is to take those losses and see what can we actually put into action to make sure that does not dramatically affect our mental health, that it doesn't wound us or hurt us more than it actually needs to, but that it actually is something that we can grow in, develop in, and actually, in a sense, increase in our resilience as a result. So I'm going to take a look first of all at one of the things that I think we all need, but there's a sense of, oh, I'm not so sure here whether we've got this anymore, and that is the sense of physical safety. You know, I don't know what it's like in the UK. We can get to watch the news, but we're here in Hungary, and I know that in Hungary we're in lockdown just as you're in lockdown in the UK. And I know that for us it feels like when we go out in public, it's a little bit like running the gauntlet. We aren't quite sure who's got this virus. Are they being sensible? Are they social distancing, and what's going on? So there's that sense of the stuff that's outside of our control, and it never will be in our control. And somehow we have to come to peace with regard to that, because otherwise, you know, we can end up, I guess, beating ourselves up about it, or panicking, or thinking, I don't even want to leave the house. So one of the things that I think is that, first of all, we've got 2 things that we can do in any of these situations of loss. Number 1, we need to know our position in God and what God has to say about the situation and what God has to say about us. And the second one is we also need to do our part. So God does his part, we do our part. So the first thing that I want to look at is Psalm 46 verse 1. And in the ESV it says, God is our refuge and our strength, a very present help in trouble. And when we feel unsafe, and even when we are unsafe, because sometimes this isn't just a feeling, is it? Often there is a lack of safety, and I know that some of you have already experienced firsthand what it's like to go through seeing a loved one with this virus, or even having it yourself. But our refuge is in God. That's our go-to. That's the place that we run. And when I was writing this up and sort of mulling over it, I was thinking, yeah, that's the place that we should go. And it's a place I should go, but it's not always a place I do go. And I don't know whether you're a little bit like that, where sometimes you can run around and do a little bit of, this isn't very pleasant, I don't like this. And then we suddenly remember who God is and where he is, and that he's with us, and that we can actually take on board what he said and stand on his promises, stand on his word. But there's the other side of that. What's our part in it? And Proverbs 27 verse 12 says, the prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple, or the foolish, keep going and pay the penalty. So we have our part to play. You know, I grew up in Northern Ireland. I'm sure that you've recognised the accent. I can't lose that even after all of these years of not being in that country. But that meant I grew up with terrorism. And it was very much part of the normal life for me to have to think about safety, to know the areas that I could go into and the areas that I shouldn't go into, and to make choices daily which would keep me safe. And it's a bit like you get in the car, you put your seatbelt on, and that provides safety. So it's a bit like that in this time. We need to just put our seatbelt on. It doesn't mean we don't have faith in God. It doesn't mean we don't trust him, but we put our seatbelt on, or a face mask in this case, or whatever it is that we need to do, just so that we can be safe. But physical safety is a massive thing that we need to be proactive with regard to. You know, the other thing though about physical safety is, I want to talk a little bit about physical safety in the home. Now, in the area that we work, in the area of marriage and family, not every family has a safe place. People don't necessarily feel safe in their home, and we need to be proactive in reaching out to friends and family and other people just to make sure that they are safe and that they are well. But there's another element of being safe. And how many of you are mums? Can I have a little wave if you're a mum? Okay. If you're a mum, and especially if you're a mum of young children and they're driving you a little bit nutty, there needs to be a bit of a safe place there for you too. And that safe place can be just that wisdom of taking 10 minutes out to go and calm down, and to maybe go into the bedroom, close the door. If you're in a situation where you don't have the luxury of space, even having that sort of sense of creating a safe space around you, so that there's a place that you can go. It could be that, okay, when mummy's in this chair, this is a no bug zone, and I won't sit in it all day. I promise you I won't sit in it all day, but I'll just need 10 minutes out so that I can calm down and I can react well. So we think about safety in terms of what we need to be safe, but also about what we need to keep our family safe. And maybe there's a place that, you know, the family just need to take turns to go to calm down and to be quite chill about what's happening. The other loss that we experience, and that we actually need a feeling of being able to take action when something happens. So a loss is a loss of mobility, and I don't mean the loss of mobility of not being able to just nip out and go clothes shopping. I mean loss of mobility in that sense of we can't go to our normal flight or fight responses. We can't do what we normally do. We live really, really close to Italy. It's about 5 hours away, and loads of Romanians who were living in Italy felt unsafe there because of the coronavirus. So the first thing that they did was to run. They came right through Hungary back to Romania and stopped in Romania, and then very, very quickly people in Romania ended up getting the virus, and it wasn't something that was helpful. They thought that they were doing the right thing. They thought they were running. They thought they were doing what they needed to do to respond to a crisis. But God tells us that there's a different way to respond to a crisis. And I know that for us personally, as we've gone through different things in life, this verse has really been a help to us. Exodus 14 verse 14, the Lord himself will fight for you, just stay calm. And that's the NLT version. Or the NIV says, just stay still. And sometimes we're so frantic trying to do stuff that, and trying to react, that we end up, you know, our stress hormones are going off the charts. And what we end up doing is, rather than having a calm environment, rather than creating that sense of peace, sense of security, sense of calm for our kids or for our wider family, we end up creating a bit more of the drama. And God's saying, look, stay calm, be still. He's going to fight for us, and we need to trust him in that. And we don't want to fall into the trap of becoming the foolish woman that Proverbs 14 talks about. A foolish woman builds her home, a wise woman builds her home, but a foolish one tears it down with her own hands. So, you know, rather than going out and, you know, getting angry with people in the house and getting frustrated, let's do something practical. So again, I want to bring some practical stuff. What can you do? Well, first of all, go out. If you still have the luxury of going out, so go out and get some exercise. That's a really good way of being proactive and getting stuff done. Some of you have been cleaning your houses from top to bottom. I'm not one of those, but who has? Who's been cleaning every cupboard and getting everything put into... Yeah, that's a really good way of being able to get rid of some of those stress hormones. Doing some of the jobs that have been left unfinished. In a sense, you're taking action, you're acting against this sense of immobility, and you're doing something proactive in order to stay calm. But there's something even better than that, and that is staying calm by meditating on the Word of God. And as Isaiah chapter 26 verse 3 says, you keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you. So in other words, the person who trusts in the Lord will have perfect peace. But we need to stay our minds, or keep our minds on him. We need to focus on who he is in the middle of all of this. The next point is a little bit like the other one, but instead of it being a loss of safety, it's a loss of sense of security. Many people are in this situation where they don't know what's happening with their jobs, and I don't want to ignore that sort of situation where you do not know what's going to come next. You don't know where your expenses are going to come from. You don't know what's going to be met, and again, we can go to the scripture and get some comfort. Philippians 4 verse 6 says, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. So when we've got a need, then we need to ask God. And, really right at the start of the virus, we had a few really rough days where, as people were being impacted, we realised, this is hitting our support big time, because people were saying, really sorry, we don't have a job, and we can't support you anymore. And again, initially, what's our reaction? Is our reaction to just panic a little bit? Yeah, it is, usually, if we're all honest. And us being missionaries doesn't mean we're superhuman. But then we remembered we need to go before God. We need to present our petitions and our requests to him. And we've just testimony after testimony of God's provision. 2 Corinthians 9 verse 8 says, and God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things at all times, having all you need, you will abound in every good work. That's a lot of alls. So in all things at all times, having all you need, you will abound in every good work. I'm going to just leave that briefly and go on to the next point, because I think this verse overlaps 2 points. First of all, we know that God provides for us, but the next point that I want to make is that, when we're in this time of crisis, we can lose purpose. We just wonder what are we doing? And especially if we have lost our job, maybe there's an identity issue going on, there can be lots of things. Or even it can be, I used to do this ministry, but now I'm not quite sure how to do it. I don't know, does that mean I'm not relevant anymore? What's going on? But this verse says this, and God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things, at all times, having all you need, you will abound in every good work. That word abound means simply having more than enough, having an excess. So in this time where you might feel limited, God's saying, don't be limited. I am going to give you things to do so that you will abound, that you will be able to bless other people, and you'll have the provision from me to do that, but you will have enough within you that you can bless other people, because it's not just about us. God has created us to do stuff for him, to have a purpose. And if that still leaves you scratching your head thinking, well, what is it, Lord, that I can do? Even if you don't have the specifics of that, there is a beautiful verse in Micah. It's one of my favourite verses, Micah chapter 6 verse 8. And it says, he has told you, oh man, what is good. So we already know the things that are good and what's good. And what does the Lord require of you? So what's your purpose? This is your purpose, to do justice. So in other words, be fair. To do justice means, don't be unjust as well in your thoughts towards other people. Don't sort of take the hump because somebody hasn't given you a call. Maybe just get on the phone to them and give them a call instead. Don't sit in a seat of judgment and be unjust in this season, even if it's to do with the government and maybe you don't agree with all of the government decisions. But let's be just, let's be fair in this particular time. Love kindness. What does loving kindness mean in this season for you? And maybe in the breakout groups you can discuss some of this. What does it mean to be kind? How can you reach out to friends, to neighbours, to family and be kind? Not just the family in your home, but to others who are outside of the home. And walk humbly with your God. Walking humbly, it's an issue of pride, but I really like what Rick Warren has to say in his book, Purpose Driven Life, because he says true humility is not thinking less of yourself, it is thinking of yourself less. So if you've been stuck a bit down in the dumps and you've been thinking, oh, I'm locked down again and look at this and and we go through this whole negative moaning thing, don't we? Instead of responding like that, let's change perspectives. Let's start focusing on what God has for us and be positive in it. Psychology would tell us a lot about, get hold of your identity, know who you are, etc. The best place that I can say is in this time for you to get your identity, to get your sense of purpose, it's get it from God. 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 9 says, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light." That hasn't changed. Just because you're stuck at home, it does not mean that you are no longer a chosen people or a royal priesthood. You're still a holy nation. You are still God's precious possession. So if you're struggling with your identity at the moment, maybe go to that verse, print it out and write in very clear letters and stick it up somewhere who you are in Christ, because you do not need to lose who you are in this particular time. We're going on to the next thing that we lose. We lose a sense of time and sequences. And along with that, we also lose something called predictability. So has anybody seen that thing that's going around on the internet at the moment? Instead of talking about Thursday, they're talking about Blur's Day. And it sort of all of the time just goes together and you kind of lose track of where you are and what's going on. Well, we still don't need to be disorientated with regard to time. If we look at Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1, as it goes on as well, there's a lot there that just says there's a season for all of this. There's a time for everything. There's a season for every activity under heaven. And there's a season for this, there's a season for the lockdown. And rather than saying, oh, I wish it was over, let's ask God, what does he want to speak to us during this time of lockdown? What's he got for us in this season? I'm the type of person who gets a little bit impatient. So here in Hungary, we've got 4 very distinct seasons. We've got extreme heat, extreme cold. And what I'll do is, when it is spring, I'll be thinking, oh, can't wait for summer to come, can't wait for those lovely warm days. When it's summer, I'll say, oh, it's too hot, can't wait for autumn. It'll be lovely when it's autumn because then it'll be a wee bit cooler again. And when it's autumn, I actually long for winter because I love snow and we get snow here. And it's, I can't wait until it's really freezing and then we can go out and and everything is about future instead of enjoying the season that I'm in. And so I want to encourage you that if you're like me, try and put the brakes on that and just say, Lord, help me to see the purpose of the season that I'm in and work with that, because I know that you've got a plan for it. Another little thing though that is going to help us within this season is, and again I want to bring the spiritual and the practical, make sure that you keep a schedule. Don't just let yourself drift. Put a plan of action in. Make sure that you get up in the morning. Get up, get dressed. Well, get up, get washed, get dressed, preferably in that order. Get your breakfast. Make sure that you have something to look forward to. If you're used to working with a calendar, write in when you're going to call a friend. But even planning, if you're going to watch a movie at night, put in that you're going to watch a movie at night so that you've got something to look forward to, because we need structure. God has created us for that. So if we have a loss of structure, then we lose time and we lose this sense of well-being. And the other thing is that we actually need light. So if you get up in the morning and you haven't, you can't go straight out to get your exercise, go sit by a window. And on that very practical side of things, that's going to help, because that again will just keep your body clock in the right mode so that when you go to bed at night, you can sleep. Okay. Very quickly, the last one, loss of connection. How many of you have really struggled with not being able to go around and see your friends or hang out with your family or, you know, just do normal life? I know I have. It is tough, and it's tough for the extroverts especially, but don't think that it's not tough for the introverts, because it is. It is really tough. We have not been designed to be alone for this long, and so therefore we need to try and be creative in how we connect with one another. God says it's not good to be alone. What we do need is we need face-to-face contact. That's why something like this Zoom is great, because we get to look at people, we get to get a response. I'm actually finding it, and I know we have to do mute mics to be able to you know, to be able to do this and for everybody to hear, but it's really difficult not to get a response. We've been designed that if we laugh, somebody else laughs. We've been designed that if you know, if we're sad and we start to cry, that somebody's going to respond by putting their arm around us or doing something like that. And we need to have that reaction and interaction. So I want to encourage you, don't, you know, ignore Zoom or the other social media things. Don't just resort to typing. Try and get these face-to-face contacts, because they're really important. And if you go out for a walk, I know it sounds a bit creepy, but look at some people's homes, and if you see them in the window, wave, you know, smile. Just helping people to feel like I'm not alone here, I'm not isolated, someone has seen me, someone knows me. And that just really helps to encourage. So I want you to get a bit creative with how you make those connections. You know, I really think that we do not have to, as Christians, experience loss in a tremendous way that other people are having to experience it. As Christians, we can put the practical things into action, but we can also put the spiritual things into action. And I want to just leave you with Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 8. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid and do not be discouraged. There's a number of things that I find in that verse. Number one, the Lord himself goes before you. He gives you the sense of purpose. Number two, he will be with you. He gives you that sense of connection. He will never leave you nor forsake you. So we're not going to be abandoned in this process. He speaks to the sense of fear that we might have, or that insecurity. Do not be afraid. And he speaks to the sense of discouragement that we also might have. And he just says, you don't need to be discouraged. I'm with you. I'm for you. I've got a purpose for this. So I hope that that is something that has been encouraging to you on the spiritual level, and I hope that it's something for you as well, that on the practical level you will be able to implement. As we go into the breakout groups, what I want you to do is I want you to think about those 6 points.